Thanks a lot, Zoe. So just to kind of go into what is the kind of purpose and sort of objectives today, what I want to do is share some insights from the Strategic Innovation Program and its implications for sustainable business. And then, as people have already touched on, really provide an opportunity for you to meet, interact in small groups, network, and just sort of hopefully not just network, but make some new friends. But before we go into that, just to introduce myself as well, as Zoe's very kindly already alluded to, I'm Cyrus. I'm one of the leads within our sustainability and innovation practice within Accenture, which really focuses on how we embed sustainability through innovation practices and the organizational structures. I had the good fortune of working with Mark over a number of years to develop and lead the Strategic Innovation Program, OSIP, which I know many of you have done, and also have the current pleasure of working with some other faculty on the Leading Sustainable Corporations Program, where I'm currently the head tutor as well. So this is really actually a kind of personal passion of mine, which is how are we bringing together innovation and sustainability, two of my kind of favorite topic areas, to really kind of address some of our key challenges that we're all facing in the world at the moment. I'm also just very quickly going to put myself on Do Not Disturb because I'm getting too many pings in the background that are horribly distracting. So that hopefully gives a little bit of context. Throughout, I'd love it if people could, put stuff in the chat, put your hand up. I'm sure that we're all used to these online sessions by now, but would love to have that interaction as we go through. So to start with, I'm just going to sort of share a bit of a prompt, 2 questions, and feel free to either put in the chat or put your hand up to get us started. 2 questions. What does innovation mean to you? And what does sustainable business mean to you? Can have a few seconds to think. And then would love to get some thoughts to kick us off. Carmel, thank you.
To me, innovation.
And sorry to interrupt. What I'd love is that if people share, would love to hear a little bit, even just a sentence of sort of who you are, where you're dialing in from. Always lovely to hear the context that people's comments are coming from.
Okay, hi, I'm Carmel Brady, and I'm dialing in from Kingston in London, and I work for Your Healthcare, which is a community interest company delivering community healthcare to the people of Kingston. And speech and language therapy is my background. Innovation to me means doing things differently to how they've always been done. And sustainability is in making any decision about how you do things, that it can last for some time without too much stress or chaos or disruption.
Love both of those. Thank you for kicking us off. Anyone else like to add? So Anna Maria, I can see you're saying new ways to solve problems that are not functioning or current processes. Maybe Anna Maria, if you're able to, love it if you're able to come off mute and share a little bit more about what.
Sure. Just taking off what you just said was that for me, innovation is not always necessarily reinventing the wheel, but coming up with solutions that you're not using right now that are different and more creative and can solve the problems more efficiently and effectively, whatever that may be.
Sounds good. Thank you. Caroline, great to get your thoughts.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Yep.
Great. I had to move to my cell phone. The notebook wasn't working fine. So I'm from Brazil. I'm R&D and innovation manager in a biotech company. I was alumni of the Oxford Leading Sustainable Corporations program in 2022. And for us in our company, we have this thought where we say that innovation is creativity issuing invoices, right?
Okay.
So you need the creativity, but you also need to make money from that. And that's innovation for us.
Brilliant. I love it. Thank you so much for adding that. And I think, we'll touch on this a little bit later, right? Innovation doesn't always have to be about what's the new shiny product. Innovation can also be just around how do you make something that's perhaps not that exciting, just easier, better, smoother, more efficient to do. So thank you for sharing that perspective. Lena, I like your start here. Do you want to maybe come off mute and share a bit more about what you're saying here?
Hi, I'm Lena, so I'm dialing in from London Heathrow, work in pharmaceutical specialist career services.
Great.
So as per what I've entered into the chat box, so innovation, I think, to me, is the synthesis of most current, technological, intellectual advances that we have with professional expertise. That's something that we do on a daily basis in a pharmaceutical specialist career area. Sustainability, I think for me is twofold. That's what's mentioned previously, sustainable processes, ethical, realistic, human orientated, something that can last, something that there is, I've identified as a gap in a lot of companies that I worked for that, always just good for now. And sometimes it has a place, but a lot of the time it needs to be more sustainable when it comes to processes. And the other side of it, of course, is environmental impact, which I think ESG probably one of the good ways to, develop that in corporations. So that's
Brilliant.
my take on it.
Thank you. And I think we've got a few different perspectives there, and we already kind of touched on a few different terms, right? Whether it's ESG, whether it's sustainability, some may have thought about CSR, some, there's all sorts of different, I guess, evolutions of this term. And I guess what I want to do is take a bit of a step back and really think about some research that kind of looked at recently around how sustainability and innovation, really those organizations that bring those two things together are going to be able to really have the kind of competitive advantage that organizations are currently lacking as we're thinking about it. So firstly, if we look at it from a sustainability perspective, I'm sure some of you, maybe not all, are familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are a set of 17 different goals that articulated key sort of targets, metrics, etc., that as a world we need to achieve to drive a more sustainable future in society. And from that context, what we're talking about here is a sustainable future, or even an organization, is one that works for all stakeholders. So yes, shareholders are still important. No one's saying a company shouldn't make money, shouldn't think about its shareholders, but also how are we thinking about our employees, how are we thinking about the community that we operate in, how are we thinking about the planet, whether it's land, sea, etc., and the impact that we have on those kind of broader stakeholders to drive business. And there is a huge amount of sort of money that needs to be invested in there, and therefore huge business opportunities for those that are able to harness that. And that will require new business models, new products, new services, new ways of thinking to drive those things. If we're focusing specifically on energy, which we know is not the entirety of sustainability, but is one kind of key part, the IEA is estimated to reach net zero by 2050. So this point where our outputs are netted off with our consumption. Sorry, our consumption is netted off with any kind of other inputs or circular initiatives that we can, will require, we'll need investment of more than triple of what we currently have by 2030 to actually keep to a consistent level by 2050. And then what we're seeing here around this sort of those organizations that are being able to bring together sustainability and innovation are signaling that kind of new what we call the new future of competitiveness. But I guess, what does that mean, right? And let's sort of dig a little bit more into this. What we kind of are seeing is essentially a top to bottom redefining and retooling of what success means for organizations. So if we start from the top, from a global economy and government's perspective, we often talk about, we measure the success of a government by its GDP growth, by job creation, or by reduction in inflation. But we don't really measure the success of a government by happiness, by citizen success, by satisfaction. We don't really measure it so explicitly by carbon footprint. We don't really measure it so explicitly by job reduction. To a certain extent, yes, but people are always talking about GDP. So how are we really bringing together those broader ways of thinking about economic success as a way that we hold our governments and economies to account? And then with that, we need to think about the money, the capital markets. And again, traditionally, the cap markets are focused on financial returns, right? Shareholder capital, return to shareholders, return on investment. But more and more shareholders are asking for non-financial returns, or understanding the non-financial impacts of the investments that they're making. And that is resulting in a real kind of issue and challenge for chairs, CEOs, and boards, who are not only now expected to achieve all of the normal business performance metrics, but also provide clear strategies for delivery, measurement, and performance of ESG impact, for environmental, social, and governance, whether that's around measuring and mitigating climate, carbon, biodiversity impact, whether that's around looking at social impacts around the communities, around human rights, around supply chain, around health and safety, parental leave rights, diversity and I&D. All of these kind of lenses are all part of now what investors are looking at, and therefore business leaders need to be thinking about as well. Which therefore means we need to rethink, what does an organization, what are the kind of key capabilities needed within the organization to actually drive this sort of new way of success. And that's now thinking about new forward-looking management information, data analytics that's delivered to decision makers at the right time in the right place to actually enable real-time decision making rather than purely backwards-looking reporting. And finally here, we think about, what does that mean for talent? What does that mean for people? And this is really where, to a certain extent, the innovation mindset comes in, because this is thinking about new ways of thinking, new ways of working, new ways of doing. And we're going to touch on a few different innovation models as we go through this seminar, to think about how we can then apply that to more sustainable solutions. Caroline, I can see you've got a question. Love to get your thoughts.
I apologize. I kept
an old
my
hand.
hand raised. I'm
no
sorry.
worries, no worries. We've all done it. Ajay.
Yeah, I have a question, and that is because whenever we talk about the sustainability piece, one of the common things which I've heard in different forums is a lack of universal methodology to actually capture the metrics.
Yep.
Because I think what you might be capturing on what I might see as a number might be quite different from what some other geography or some other business leader might perceive, or even a political leader might perceive it as a number. So I think one of that is a fundamental issue, don't you think so? That we all need as a global community to actually arrive at one common methodology, which doesn't seem to be there.
Yeah,
and we seem to be talking about that in the World Economic Forums and everywhere, that we need to have these sustainable goals by 2035, 2030, 2050, whatever it is. But I don't think we've really arrived at a common methodology. I mean, what's your view about it? I don't know if I'm right or wrong. Please correct me if my understanding.
I think you're right to a certain extent, and I'm aware that there's sort of different kind of sort of levels of familiarity here. So you're certainly right that there is no single methodology. However, there is a lot of alignment, or sorry, there's a lot of convergence, where we've had typically a sort of alphabet soup of different sustainability standards, from metrics developed by the World Economic Forum, the Global Reporting Initiative, the Science-Based Targets, the TCFD, TNFD, all these kind of different sort of alphabet soup. But a lot of these now are converging into sort of specific sources. And one of the biggest ones, which you may be familiar with, is the International Sustainability Standards Board, the ISSB, which has actually been convened under the auspices of the IFRS, the Financial and Accounting Standards Board. And essentially what that is trying to do very explicitly by bringing it under an accounting standards body is to put the same level of rigor and controllership and to a certain extent compliance behind sustainability reporting as we do around financial reporting. So if you're not familiar with it, it's worth looking up the ISSB, and they've just recently, a few months ago, launched the first 2 sets of standards focused on, if I remember correctly, one focused on climate and carbon and one focused on biodiversity. That is really, exactly to your point, trying to put those sort of universal standards. Now, at the moment, they are standards; they're not regulation. But the aim is that by having these kind of rigorous, peer-reviewed, community-reviewed standards under the auspices of the IFRS, just as the IFRS accounting standards turned from standards into regulation as they were adopted by many global governments, except the US that has the US GAAP standards. So too similarly, the more and more countries and economies that adopt the ISSB standards, those become regulation, the more and more we start to converge and increasingly do so. So we're not there yet, but what I will say is those companies that are looking ahead, they can see the regulatory writing on the wall and are already starting to think about how do they put in the right kind of measurement, the right kind of data tracking, the right kind of reporting, to actually enable them to produce the reports that very soon, less than a handful of years and couple of years, will become mandatory, to the extent that just as now a CFO or CEO could be jailed for misrepresenting their profit margins or communicating their balance sheets or P&L statements, so too could someone pretty senior be jailed for misrepresenting their carbon footprint or their economic or social impact, because that is the level of rigor that we're expecting of these sorts of disclosures. So slightly long answer, but the short answer is you're right, it's not there, but there is convergence and it's worth looking ahead to see where those are, and then we go from there.
Okay.
And I guess what I'm going to do now is start sprinkling some of the OSIP content, the Strategic Innovation Program content, into here. And this is really what we wanted to do, was think about how are we applying the innovation content to some of our sustainability challenges, and really trying to juggle, I guess, everything that I mentioned on this slide requires a kind of so-called organizational organizational ambidexterity, right? The way of moving at multiple speeds to achieve multiple goals at the same time. And one of the key frameworks that we think about within innovation is this tension between exploit and explore. So to what extent are you exploiting your current capabilities, your current assets, your current partners, your current ecosystems, your current supply chain, versus exploring new products and services, new business markets, new consumer bases, new partnerships, new value chains. The key thing here is you can't do this. Is not an either or kind of situation. Any company that is focusing on one or the other will not be sustainable. If all you're doing is exploiting your current set of capabilities and your current footprint, you will soon run out. If all you're doing is exploring new avenues, new opportunities, you will not realize the benefits of the value that you have today. So always trying to drive that kind of organizational ambidexterity is really key. And a good way of thinking about this frame is through the sort of TMO framework that Mark and his colleague Victor Seidel pioneered, which really looks at the kind of strategies for value creation as being at the interplay between technology, new markets, and the organizational capabilities that you have. So it's all very well to have the technology, but do you have the market that needs it? Do you have the organizational capability to deliver it? And vice versa, you can see the sort of different combinations here. And so it's worth thinking as you're both exploiting your current situations, but also exploring new opportunities. how are you pulling together that interplay between technologies and sort of digital innovation, which we kind of really see as going to be a key enabler for scale and new value, but also making sure that you're not just doing it for the sake of it, but there is a market for what you're doing and that you have the organizational capabilities to deliver on that. And so as part of that, having the right organizational operating model is critical for innovation to flourish in a sustainable manner. And one of the kind of key frameworks, again, that we think about here is the so-called SPOC framework. Do we have the right systems in place? So how routines and activities are assembled to facilitate that process, whether that's through different stage gates, whether that's through a kind of open innovation sort of process, whatever that might be. Do you have the right people? Do you have the right skill sets, the right backgrounds, the right experiences to actually deliver what you're looking at? Do you have the right organizational structure, whether it's from a functional lens, whether it's through governance, whether it's through interlocks and interfaces within different teams, whether it's even KPIs aligned to different orgs? And then finally, that culture, do you have the right shared values and norms within the organization? We sometimes think about challenging orthodoxies being those deeply held, widely shared beliefs that sit within an organization. Sometimes those orthodoxies can be great because that is what brings people together. It's a shared way of thinking. Sometimes orthodoxies can really hold us back. So also challenge yourself to think about what are the orthodoxies, the cultural orthodoxies that might be holding us back, that if we flip those on their head, can actually allow us to find new value and new opportunities. And I also just sort of said I wanted to share a couple of different innovation models, right? So the first one I want to look at here is this sort of drivers of innovation. And this sort of, you can think of both of these as two sides of the same coin. So supply push, where the market force is coming from a new offering that actually changes the way that people behave, or demand pull, where it comes from the pull of the customer. This is what they need. And I've got two examples here, and I'd just love maybe if people are able to share any other examples that they can think of that illustrate that supply push demand pull. The examples I've got here is the car. There's the kind of infamous, that probably isn't true, is a sort of urban myth, Henry Ford quote that some of you may have seen, which is, you know, if I'd asked them what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. So it's this idea of, if you just ask the people what they want, they may not know, and that's not always where true innovation comes from. And you never would have come up with the car if you'd asked the people what they wanted. You'd just bred faster horses. But on the other side, from a demand perspective, I think a good example of that is high-speed internet, which really has been, if you think about where we are now versus 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you know, the speed of internet has just increased. That has taken huge amounts of innovation, and that has been really consumer pull. If we think, you know, we now no longer have the patience to wait for more than a couple of seconds for a page to load, or more than a few seconds for something to buffer. That consumer-led demand has just driven faster and faster innovation, and faster and faster internet. Any other suggestions for supply push demand pull? AJ, example of demand pull AI. Love to get your, if you're able to come off mute and maybe share what made you suggest that?
Yeah, because I think looking at what started as just, you know, business process automation, if I may, a few years back, 5 to 7 years back, and then we talked about robotic process automations and all that stuff that we're talking about. Now, since the last 12 to 18 months, it's all about generative AI coming in. I mean, then slowly this whole word of automation is you're no longer hearing the word automation, because that was a buzzword for the last 3 to 4 years. But the moment Gen AI came in, now it's all about AI altogether. So it's all about automation moving into AI. Now the AI moving into LLM models. We are talking about the different models being, you know, looked at. And I was reading something yesterday, as soon as I said it, that obviously how these big tech companies are probably creating their own LLM models could also be something which could be a detriment altogether in terms of finding out how that will create an ethical AI world for all of us to work with. So I think those are things that are really going to define. I guess it's the same thing like what we are doing in sustainability, where we will probably be driven to get to a common sort of a standards on the models itself altogether at some point in time to sort of adapt and sort of work with them. So that is just
Yeah.
my example that I can say.
No, it's a great example, and I can also see Florencia's added around a very good point that there was a time without internet, and I think that sort of shows a very good case of something that's, I think, probably started as a supply push innovation that then has become a demand pull. So to be clear, when I say the demand pull piece is the high speed nature of the internet, the need for it to be faster and faster, more instantaneous. But I completely agree that at the beginning, it would most likely have just appeared. No one asked for the internet. No one before it was there, from a consumer perspective, who would have conceived that? I think there may be a little bit of background on the call. If you're not speaking, it'd be great if you're able to mute yourself, or if we can potentially mute.
Okay, close that side,
people.
but I can't close the other side. This is okay. Okay, thank you. Let me know if you want some cold water.
Brilliant. I think. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd love some cold water. So just to look at the sort of second one here, these sort of entrepreneurial enablers as well. We often see entrepreneurs, key drivers of information. Again, two sides of the same coin. One which is around sort of more traditional black box R&D, and Apple is notorious for being super secretive about many of its innovations. I think arguably in more recent years, the evolutions have perhaps been arguably less dramatic than they were. But certainly when it started, the iPod, the iPhone, the idea that you could have computing power of an Apollo rocket in your pocket, who would have thought of that at the time? So the amount of sort of black box R&D that went into that was incredible. Flip side, user-driven innovation, where actually you're using the kind of human centricity and human-centric techniques to really continuously improve and continuously innovate on the design of a product. And toothbrushes is a good example here, where the sort of, and I know a bit weirdly too much about it, but the sort of ergonomic features of the toothbrush, the different sizes of the head, how the spikes of the bristles, how it curves, etc. All of that has been driven by extensive user testing that drives new innovation in toothbrush models. Again, I'll pause for a second. Love to get any other ideas or thoughts on different sort of innovations that you've seen in your own experiences that kind of maybe resonate with any of those models.
If I may ask, Cyrus, this is Michael. I work for another university. I work for Brunel University in West London. So I'm in the innovation management space in the university. So I mean, in research, I did health management. So very insightful discussion. So in terms of the trigger for innovation, sometimes you see that certain organizations, because they feel like, oh yeah, people are a bit fed up with this particular product, we want to optimize this further, give a new name, give a new version number, a little bit of a nice color, a different package, or whatever. We know lots of handheld devices and things we use. So so and then, which means, I mean, linking with the other point you mentioned, the sustainability. So we are discarding the earlier versions of our phone, or that endless pushing towards the customers to buy because innovation, we are also wasting lots of resources, which is contradicting with the principles of sustainability. So, any thoughts? So, where do we draw the line?
Yeah, and I think it makes a really good point, which I was going to come to, and thank you for alluding to it. Not all innovation is good. We don't always need it. And I think, how we apply innovation, where we apply innovation, and the kind of human choices behind that is going to be a key part of how we drive a more sustainable future. Because you're totally right. We could apply innovation to just creating more waste and creating more rubbish, or we could apply innovation to developing more circular business models, to developing reverse logistics programs, to developing greener ways of packaging, of manufacturing, etc. If we think about the amount of innovation happening in the sustainability, climate, human rights, spaces, it's huge. And it would be great if that, or if more innovation could be applied to those areas and less in just making more products for the sake of products. And hopefully that's where this fantastic community comes into play. But thanks for your comment. Carmel.
Yeah, again, just to remind people, I'm from the health service background, and innovation is often driven by lack of resource or crisis. So that's a good thing. And also, I would say just being mindful of what's available in your community, networks and facilities that can work for innovation. So yeah, network contacts, crises and resource.
Yeah, great idea. And we actually did a session just for the OSIP completers about a year ago that was about innovation in developing contexts, and had some really interesting insights from exactly that point, that a lot of fantastic innovation comes from a moment of need. Thank you for that. Amara.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this. So I'm a little bit jet lagged, but I'll try my best. So one of the things that I, as a lawyer, feel that, innovation is where what comes into my work is when we see migration of people, and especially in immigration programs that different governments offer. So I see immigration programs offered in Canada, in the UK, as well as in Australia, which are driven by this concept of innovation that, can people coming from the global south bring some kind of innovative models to our countries to scale job production, maybe the economy, or contribute to the economy in some way. So I feel that sometimes that innovation can also be driven by necessity for people to survive, really.
Yeah.
So I agree with what Caramel said, that sometimes it's the crisis situation that brings forward innovation. And for people who are really struggling to survive in economies where there are no opportunities, that becomes the biggest driver to create something new. And then maybe bring all of those, elements together of the networks, the systems, the approach that you're applying to your product or innovation, whatever you're doing. I'm actually going to be in London in about 10 days, and Cyrus, and I wanted to reach out to you as well. There's a conference taking place at LSE for impact lawyers. And this connects with what we were talking about. I think one of the speakers were talking about, what metric are we going to talk about? Which metric is going to be universal? So there are a lot of people in different communities. So I'm also involved in COP, in climate change. So there are different metrics there. There are different metrics coming up between lawyers. I know that businesses are talking about the push and pull and the supply and demand and all. But really, there are, I think, over 500 metrics that are available right now for companies to look into. Which one do you pick and choose? So maybe it's just a matter of building your community around your network, a metric, and see how you can collaborate with the others.
Yeah, I mean, lots of great points there. Thank you for sharing, and doing very well for being jet lagged. Yeah, I mean, I think where to start. And I'm also very aware of time, so I'm keen to sort of keep this going as well. Firstly, great to hear about the LSE event. Always interesting to hear what's happening in other places. I think your point around which metric do you choose? I think there are some common core metrics that is important to focus on, and bodies like the ISSB are really trying to focus on that, so that we don't have this sort of proliferation of different standards depending on oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Not only because it's just helpful for the companies, but also from a systemic perspective, we want people want to be able to frankly compare who is doing better, who's not performing as well, and that then informs the capital markets, and ideally you want to get to a place, I think, where we already get a place where companies' share price is affected by their financial performance and the financial statements that they publish. We want to kind of get to a point where their share price is actually affected by their sustainability reports. If they're doing well from a sustainability lens, that should make them more valuable, not just for the sake of it, but because it means they are more insulated to climate risks. They've managed their physical and transition risks. They are taking care of their people better, so they're more likely to have high retention rates, which means that they are more likely to deliver a better service, which means that they're more likely to retain their customers, which means that all of these kind of things should have a value to them. So I think all of that kind of helps to drive there. I'm very aware of time, and I'd love to spend a few minutes on a particular case that I think brings a lot of this together, and then I want to make sure that we've got some time for the kind of meeting of each other at the end as well. So I'm going to zoom through this a little bit quicker than perhaps I'd intended, so apologies in advance, but we will be sharing the recording and the content, and the purpose of this is to give you a bit of a taster anyway. So if you want to find out more, then we'll kind of let you know how you can get more involved. But I want to focus on a company that some of you may have heard of, some of you may not, called Indigo Agriculture. It was kind of darling of the agri-tech system, specializing in agricultural tech and microbiology. The real kind of issue they were trying to address was around low crop yields, where essentially crops were just not surviving due to harsh weather, environmental conditions, essentially climate change. And so they developed seed treatments that were all completely sort of sustainable, organic, etc., but enhanced plant health and productivity, and also helped to revolutionize those sort of farming practices and contribute to more sustainable agriculture. So the evolution of need, and I think this shows really nicely how they as a business evolved in response to need, using innovation in a sustainable way. So if we start the issue, and I think it's great if you almost think to yourself, what are the kind of issue solution kind of chains that your own organizations can draw? So the issue that they started with was the seeds are not resilient, causes the climate change and other factors causes stress on crop yields. So the solution, seed coatings, make the seeds more resilient to these adverse weather conditions. However, that resulted in a new issue. It was expensive. Applying those seed coatings required investment, infrastructure to deliver, etc., etc. So the solution, a premium. Farmers were able to sell to buyers who wanted higher quality, more sustainably produced grain, and were willing to pay a premium for it. But that was then an issue, because the buyers couldn't identify the right farmers who were selling that premium product. So solution Indigo actually developed their own marketplace. So actually a marketplace where farmers that were using their seed coatings could actually put those products on, and then buyers could know these were verified farmers that were using sustainable agricultural practices and who were willing to pay a premium for it. But then there was a challenge around getting the grain from supplier to buyer. So they created a new solution, which was a logistics platform, and actually a logistics solution. So not just the platform, but actually, literally trucks that would take them from sort of port to port, and from buyer to supplier and so forth. So I thought it's a nice case that shows in each stage there is innovation here, but that innovation is in response to a need that is driven, if we kind of think right the way back to one of the first frameworks, there is technology driven by a market need with the organizational capabilities to achieve it as well. But there were challenges. Cracks showed across the sort of systems, people, organization, and culture. It didn't always work for farmers, from sort of major issues around delays to minor frustrations around, bushels of the measurements of wheat were different from the measurements of barley, and they weren't correct on the billing. Salespeople who were not correct, they kind of didn't have the credibility with farmers because they didn't have the right industry background. From an organizational perspective, all of these products, yes, they evolved from a need, but they didn't put the right organizational structure and capabilities around it. So suddenly these new products appeared. Oh, let's do a marketplace, let's do logistics, but they didn't have the kind of operating model there. And from a culture perspective, there were reports from some of their customers and suppliers that, you know, they were doing great. They were sort of this unicorn in agri-tech, and they could do no wrong. So that kind of cavalier attitude also cost them business in the shape of their kind of customers and attitude there. So we're now going to kind of move into breakouts, and I guess got sort of two options. One is sort of think about, you know, imagine you are the CEO of Indigo. What would you do next? Alternatively, if you don't feel like discussing the case, you are welcome to just sort of share a little bit more about yourselves, current challenge or project that you're working on, and maybe a kind of key insight from this session that might help you, or anything else that you'd like from this community. And what we're going to do is put you in groups of 3 with 6-minute breakouts, and then we'll come back for a very brief plenary to wrap up. So Molly or Zoe, if we're able to kick those off.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we're just popping people into groups now.
Perfect. And appreciate a couple of people need to drop off. So I'll also just say, you know, hope to see you back in a few minutes, but also thank you if you for taking the time to join us today if you can't. But yeah, hopefully have a good chat with people, and we'll speak in a few minutes. Finished just about there. So I think what I'll just say is a massive thank you to everyone for taking an hour out of what I know is a very busy day, very busy schedules, and spending an hour with us here today. I hope this was a useful use of your time. I hope you kind of managed to hopefully learn a little bit, meet some interesting people. Love to keep in touch if people would like to. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'll hand over to Zoe to wrap us up and share some next steps.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cyrus. That was a fantastic session, a lot to digest, and I hope you all had some really thought-provoking conversations and got to know each other a bit in your groups. So we're putting some links now in the chat for you. One is to a short post-event survey to let us know your thoughts and feedback, which is really helpful for the sessions we're planning going forward. And also a link to book for the next seminar in the ElumniConnect series around leading sustainable corporations. We'll welcome back Cyrus again for that. But he'll be joined by Mary Johnston-Louis, the Programme Director and Senior Fellow in Management Practice. So hope you can join us for that session as well. We'll also pop a couple of links in there to the courses, so you can have a look at those and find out a bit more information. And I just want to say as well, thank you to Molly Williamson, our Alumni Events Officer, for arranging today and for setting up the new and growing events program for Elumni. So along with this online series, we've got a couple of upcoming in-person opportunities for you. You may already have seen in our newsletter, we have a networking event in London on the 11th of July at the Barbican. So I hope some of you will be able to join us for that. Booking details are in the newsletter, as I said, but email us if you want to find out more. And then in October, 5th and 6th of October, we have our Alumni Reunion Weekend in person at the Business School. So bookings open for this coming up in the next few weeks. So look out for that, but save the date for now. So thank you everyone for joining us. It was great to see you online, and hope to see you at future events soon.